welcome back to Minerva, and today I'm here with another sew-along video for you. So today I'm going to be making the New Look 6843, which is a pattern for a really lovely kind of classic skirt. It's got 5 different views and they vary from kind of more floaty options to more fitted ones. So there's a lot of variety, and you could make a lot of different skirts for a lot of different occasions for this. You could make slightly more casual floaty ones or more fitted ones if you were after making some office wear or something. So a lot of variety included, so it makes it a really good purchase that you can get a lot of use out of. So for this project today, I've got my pattern here ready to go. I'm going to be using this lovely cotton poplin from Rose Hubble that we have available on our website. So it's a lovely blue colour with a white floral print all over it, so really, really beautiful. You also need some interfacing for the waistband, so I've got a pack of fusible interfacing here. I'm going to be using this Gutermann Sew-All polyester thread in the shade 786. And then you also need some buttons. So I've got a pack of blue hemline buttons here and also a 7-inch zip. So I've got all this ready to go. Everything I'm using today will be linked down below and available on our website. So if you did want to have a go at making this project for yourself, go and have a look down there and you'll find all this listed ready to click on for you. So just to give you a bit of information about the sizing in this, so it ranges from a size 8 to 18 are the size brackets, and the 8 is a 24-inch waist and a 33.5-inch hip, and then the 18 is a 32-inch waist and a 42-inch hip. So those are the sizes that are available. Now there are just a couple of things I wanted to run through about the pattern before I get started that might just help you out before you go ahead and cut your fabric. So today I'm going to be making view A, which is probably the most simple and the most beginner friendly. It doesn't have any darts or anything, which some of the other views do. All of the other views do, I think. Yes, that's correct. So if you are a beginner, if you're new to sewing, I would maybe recommend starting with view A, and then you can always have a go at the other ones once you're a bit more confident. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that I found the sizing when trying to pick my sizes to making this skirt a little bit confusing. I found that I was across a really wide variety of the different things between my waist and hip measurements and things. So what I would recommend, if you find the same, is kind of having a look at the view you're making and figuring out what the key fitting points are. So for view A, I would say, because really the waistband needs to fit well and then the rest of the skirt kind of flows out from there, I would say go with the waistband size that's going to fit you, and then just go with that one. Obviously, if you were going to make one of the other slightly more fitted ones, like view C or B maybe, you might need to consider your hip measurement as well. So just play around with it, and I would definitely suggest making a mock-up of this just to make sure you get a skirt that fits you really nicely at the end. And I've done that and chosen my size based on that. So yeah, just play around with the fitting a bit first, I think, before you cut into your final fabric. Definitely a really good idea with this pattern. The final thing I would say about this pattern just before we get started is it does say it's a 1 hour easy sewing time pattern, and I do think it is. I do think you could definitely have a go at this if you were a beginner. All I would say is that some of the instructions do look a little bit confusing the way they're written out, and this is quite an old pattern, so there's maybe not as much detail included as there are on some of the newer ones. So don't be put off by it, and I'll do my best in this video to explain those things and hopefully make it a little bit easier. I think the main complicated bits come from constructing and attaching the waistband. So don't be put off and definitely have a go. I'll do my best to explain those steps in as much detail as I can on this video, which will hopefully be a really good help. But again, making that mock-up of it would definitely help you to practice those steps first before you kind of commit to your final fabric. So 100% with this pattern, if you're new to sewing, have a go, have a mock-up of it first, and that will just make it all so much easier. And as I said, I'll do my best to give as much detail in this video as I possibly can. So let's get started. So when you've cut all your fabric out, what you should have is piece 1, which is your front. You should have 2 back pieces, and then your waistband, 1 in your main fabric and 1 in your interfacing. So these are the pieces you should have once you have finished cutting out. Okay, so the first step of this project is to stay stitch the waistline of the front and back skirt pieces. And what that is a line of stitching that we do in order to stop the fabric from stretching out in the wrong direction as we're sewing it. So it does matter the direction of your stitches. So for this project, you're going to stay stitch from the outer edge to the centre, and then again from this outer edge to the centre on the front skirt piece. So don't just do one whole line. You do need to go from this edge to the centre, stop, and then do the other way. And then for the back, let me just get these. For each of the back pieces, get them the right way around. Okay, for each of these back pieces, we are going to stitch again from the outer edge in towards the centre, and then the same on the other piece as well. So that's the first step, is going to do all of that stay stitching at 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay, so once you've done your stay stitching, the next step is to assemble the back pieces and insert the zip. Now I feel like in sewing, there are a couple of different ways that you can insert a zip. And everyone kind of has a favourite way they like to do it, which might be slightly different to how someone else wants to do it. And that's not to say there's a right way or a wrong way, it's just whatever works for you. So I'm going to show you today how I like to insert my zips. Give it a go if you haven't tried it before, but if it doesn't quite work for you, that's okay, there might be a different way you want to do it. So the first step of assembling this back piece is to sew from the bottom edge up to where the notch is. So when you cut your pattern pieces, you should have transferred all your notches. So mine's just here. So you're going to sew up to there at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, and just make sure you back stitch a couple of times when you get to that notch to reinforce the area where the zip is going to be joining in. And then what I'm going to do to insert my zip, which is slightly different to the instructions aren't particularly detailed, but I think it's a slightly different way, is I'm then going to baste up to the top edge here on a really long stitch, which I'm going to remove later, just to hold this all in place while I insert the zip, and then I'll show you how I remove those basting stitches later on. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to press this whole seam open, and then finish the edges off. I'm going to finish the edges before I insert the zip, just to make it slightly easier. So I'm going to finish the whole edge off. Now you can finish your edges in whatever your preferred method is. So if you have an overlocker, you could overlock them. If you don't have an overlocker, you could use a zigzag stitch, or what I'm going to do is on my sewing machine I have an overcasting stitch and an overcasting foot, so I'll be using them to finish my edges off. So I'll go and do that now. So sewing all the way up this edge at 5/8 of an inch, reinforce when I get to the notch, and then I'm going to baste up to the top and then finish all the edges off. Okay, so once that seam is all done, we're going to insert the zip. So how I like to do this is, now I've got this seam all basted, so it's holding it together, this gives me a really good line for then lining up the centre of the zip. So what I do with the right side of the zip, so the side that you need the pillar on, you're going to put that face down on the seam here. You need to line up the bottom with where those notches were, so just here, and you need the bottom of the zip to go underneath that, so that will then be hidden on the inside of the skirt. So this bit here, which is where the actual zip ends, line that roughly up with those notches, and then this excess bit here will be underneath the zip opening just inside the skirt. So my notch is just here, so I'm going to line this up roughly, and then what I'm doing is lining up the centre of the zip with that seam as closely as I can. So roughly like that is what it should look like. So I'm then going to pin this in place, and as I pin I will just make sure that this centre of the zip is in line with the centre of the seam. So once that's pinned, what I'm then going to do is sew from just underneath the pulley. So I'll start sewing roughly about here, and I'll make sure I use a zipper foot on my machine. So make sure you use the zipper foot, because what that does is it allows you to line up your stitches as closely to the teeth of the zip as possible without actually sewing onto them. So it's a really helpful tool to use. So definitely use that. And then I'll sew all the way down the side of the zip. When I get to the bottom, I'll leave my needle in, lift the presser foot up and pivot the skirt, and then I'll sew along here. Do that again and then sew up the other side, stopping again before I get to this. The reason you don't really want to sew around the zip pull is because it will make your stitches go wobbly. So stop before you get to it, and then go back in and move the pulley down, and then do the top bit separately. So as I said, there's lots of different ways to insert zips, but this is how I'm going to go ahead and insert this one. So I'll go and do that, and then I'll come back and show you how I'm going to undo the basting stitches on the other side to reveal the zip that we have. Okay, so I've done that, and then the next thing to do is to unpick those basting stitches, and when we do that, that will reveal our zip. So you need your seam unpicker, and if you've got one that has the side with the little kind of dot on the end, if you use that side of it, then you won't put any holes in your fabric accidentally, so that's a good one to use, or just go really carefully to make sure you don't put any holes in your fabric. It should be pretty easy though. If you use long basting stitches, they come out really easily, so it shouldn't be too much of a problem. So you can see they have started to come away already, the basting stitches, so we just need to unpick those, going all the way down, and you can see when you do one, the next ones kind of open up. And you can already start to see that zip is just really nicely hidden on the inside. So it's a good technique. So I'll just go and remove all these because it's a bit hard to do that on camera. And then I'll show you what it should look like once you've removed all of them. So then, once you've removed those basting stitches, as if by magic, you have your zipper in your skirt. Working really nicely and really nicely sewn into the back of the skirt. So a really good technique. As I said before, not the only technique, but that's the way I like to do it. Okay, so once our zipper's in, the next step is to match up our back skirt piece, which is now just one piece, with our front skirt piece, which I have here. So we're going to match them up at the waistband. And you've got notches in the sides just here, so we can match them together as well. Yep, they're matching up. And then the hem as well. So we can match all of that up. And then you're going to sew all the way down the side seams at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. If you want to double check the fitting, now the zip is in, then you could either just pin it and do a pin fitting, or you could baste this side seam first. So pin it and then use a long basting stitch, go and try it on, and then once you're happy with the fit, sew it permanently in place. So a couple of options if you do want to double test the fit again. Here, really good opportunity for that. But then once you're happy with the fit, sew all the way down both side seams, 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so once we've sewn those side seams together and pressed open and finished all those edges, the next step is to start preparing our waistband. So the first step is to do the interfacing. Now the instructions talk about stitch on interfacing, which is fine if you want to go ahead and do that, but I'm actually going to use iron on interfacing just because it's a bit easier and quicker. So it's up to you. So to attach my iron on interfacing, what I'm going to do is I've got a pressing cloth, or actually just an old cotton bed sheet here. They work really well. And so I've got my waistband wrong side up, and then I've got my interfacing with the kind of bobbly side down. So the softer side is up on here. I've got my iron on, and it's on, because this is a cotton fabric, it's on quite a high heat. So just make sure you're using the right heat for the fabric that you're using. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to place my old pillowcase, or a proper pressing sheet if you have one, over the top. And I'm just going to spray that with water so it's damp. Good. And then I just take my iron and I'm going to hold it and press it down. Stops about here. For about 8 seconds. And you hear the sizzling of the fabric coming off as well. And then when I've done that section, I'll just move over to the next bit. There we go. And I'll do that all the way along. So if I just show you, when you lift it up, that has pretty much fused onto it. So you just need to do this all the way along your waistband. And then we'll get ready to attach it to the main skirt. Okay, so once the interfacing is applied and that has cooled down, we are going to, on the unnotched side of the waistband, which is a bit tricky to see once you've applied the interfacing, but I can see, for example, my centre front marking is just here, so I used a water erasable pen to pop that there. So just have a really careful look and find the side that has your markings on. And on the other side, you're going to press this under, just pressing it, not stitching it in place yet. We're going to press it under by 5/8 of an inch. So by about this much. We're going to press that under, and then we're going to trim it down to 1/4 of an inch. So press it in place and then trim it down. Once you've done that, what you're going to do is, with your main skirt, right sides out, and then with right sides together, you're going to match the centre front of the waistband with the centre front of the skirt, and then pin that, and then you've got some dots on your waistband which match up with the side seams. There's mine. So you're going to match those key bits in place, and then with right sides together, keep working way all the way around, obviously, and then with the right sides together, pin and stitch that in place at that 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. So waistband first, folding it under by 5/8 and then trimming it down to 1/4 of an inch, and then match up all the key markings on the skirt and waistband, pin and stitch together with right sides together at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so that's what that looks like when that's all done. So this is the edge I folded over, and then on the opposite edge I've sewn that waistband in place. Now the next instruction in the booklet is to layer the seams, and it's something I only recently found out what it actually means, so I thought I'd quickly explain it. What layering the seams means is that you're cutting one of them down in order to reduce the bulk. So this waistband is eventually going to be folded over like this. So you can imagine there'll be an awful lot of fabric in there. So in order to reduce that, what I'm going to do is the seam closest to the waistband, so the one that will be underneath, because we're going to press this seam towards the waistband. So the one that will be underneath, I will just trim down, and then this one will sit on top of it, so it will just reduce the bulk. Now, these seams will eventually be encased in the waistband, so there's not too much worry about finishing them off on an overlocker or with a zigzag on anything, because they are going to be encased in that waistband. You can if you want to, but it's not really a necessity. So I'm going to go ahead and trim this seam down. My one tip for doing this is to use small scissors. I think you can get scissors specifically for this purpose, but I don't have them. So I'm just going to use my smaller scissors. You obviously can go at it with your big fabric cutting shears if you want to, but I'm too scared I'll cut a big hole in my fabric. So I'm just going to go ahead and use my smaller scissors to trim this seam down, and then we will move on to the next step. Okay, so there's that seam all nice and layered. So we've got the smaller one here, the bigger one here. And then the next step I've actually started just because I thought it would be easier to demonstrate on the camera. So after you've layered that seam, you need to fold the band right sides together. So you're folding the band in half essentially with the right sides together, and then on the two ends you're sewing the ends at that 5/8 of an inch seam allowance with the right sides together. That might seem confusing. I had to read the instructions a couple of times, but this is what it means. So you fold the band right sides together and then sew the ends closed. Once you've done that, we need to take some of the bulk out of these seams here. So we're going to layer those seams again, both of them, and trim the corners. And that's going to make it easier for us to turn it nice and neatly in a second. So go ahead and do that. Okay, so I've done that. So I've reduced the bulk in these seams here. So the next step, in order to get this skirt, this waistband, facing the same way as the rest of the skirt, is if you then turn this the other way, you end up with quite nice, neat looking corners on your waistband. And you just do that all the way around, so turn the other end as well. There we go. So you then have a nice waistband looking nice and neat at the edges. I could actually probably take a little bit more of the bulk out on this one. So do just have a look at yours. If you need to go and remove a bit more of the bulk, then go ahead and do that. You can kind of keep flipping around really till you're happy. So get that looking nice and lovely. Always give it a press as well to get it looking nice and crisp. And then what you're going to be doing is then we've got this nice folded edge here, which we pressed earlier. So that will then line up nice and lovely. And you're going to fold this edge of the waistband so it covers up this seam here. And you're going to fold that all in place and pin it all in place all along. And then the instructions say to finish this waistband by hand, and they say to do a slip stitch all the way along. So you can definitely do that. The other option, and what I think I might do, just because I find it a bit easier, is, so if you fold it all round that way and you get it sitting nice and neatly, if you're very careful to cover up that seam, with the other side of the cover up that seam with the other side of the waistband, what you can do is then do what's called a stitch in the ditch, which is where you would go along from this side, and where the waistband seam to the main skirt is, very, very carefully sew a row of stitches in that seam that then catches the waistband on the other side. And it's basically invisible from the outside, but it gives you a really nice, neat finish. And I think that's what I might do. You could, of course, go ahead and do the slip stitch all the way around if you want to. That's absolutely fine. But I think I'm going to go and do it this way. If you are going to have a go at the stitch in the ditch, just, I would say, do it really slowly, really carefully, and just make sure you're lining it up really well. So you can feel that seam is just underneath on the other side, and just be really careful and really slow and go for it that way. So those are the couple of options you have for finishing off the waistband. So go ahead and finish that off in your preferred method, and then come back and we'll look at buttons and buttonholes. One thing I should say before I go and do that is when you are turning this and sewing that waistband all in place, you do need to carry on and sew all the way to the end of the tab here as well, so you don't want this bit left open. You do want to sew that all the way to the end. I just thought I should make that clear, because this is where we're going to be putting our buttonhole. So all the way to the end of the tab. Okay, so that's the waistband all attached, which means we're very nearly done. All that's left to do is sort out our button and buttonhole and then hem the skirt. So for the button and buttonhole, on the back of the waistband, you have this tab that sits over the top of the waistband below it. So they sit together like this. So what I would recommend is try the skirt on one more time, and then figure out where you would like your button and buttonhole to sit, and mark it on the top band here. Then make your buttonhole. Most machines have a buttonhole foot and an automatic buttonhole, so if you've got that, then great. If not, then you can do a manual one. So I'll be using the automatic buttonhole on my machine to do this, and the buttonhole goes in the top tab. Once you've done your buttonhole, I would then, through the middle of it, mark either with a pin or a pen or something, through the buttonhole, mark onto the lower waistband, and that will tell you where to put your button. So that's how I do that. So try it on, figure out the placement, mark that on there, make your buttonhole in the top, mark it through the middle, and then that will tell you where to put your button on the other side. So that's that. Get that done and on there, and then all that's left to do is the hemming. So the instructions say to hem this skirt by figuring out the length that you want it. So again, you can do that when you try it on to save time. Figure out the length you want your skirt to be. And then mark that on here, and the instructions say to then just fold that up, stitch it in place, and then finish the raw edge on the other side. That is probably what I'll do. Or you could do a double folded hem, so you fold it under once and then under again, and that means you've got no raw edge to finish. So that's just your preference, however you like it. So I'll go ahead and do those last few bits, so the button and the buttonhole and the hem, and then I'll show you what the final project looks like. So here is the final skirt. I've hemmed it to just above the knee, and I think it's come out really lovely. If you have a go at making this for yourself, please do create a profile on Minerva and share your make with us, as we love to see what you guys make at home. I hope this video has been really helpful and has clarified a few of the instructions for this project. Thank you so much for watching today, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!